Good evening, one and all present here. So, am I audible? Uh, yeah. So, we are here for week 6 of the live interaction session of for the NPTEL course on environmental impact assessment. The course instructor is Dr. Harshit Sosan Lakra. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Architecture and Planning at Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. We have two teaching assistants from the PMRF side. One is Ms. Isha Rathore. She is a PMRF and research scholar at the Department of Architecture and Planning at IIT Roorkee. And her sessions happen on Saturdays usually. So my sessions happen on Tuesdays. I'm Monica S. I am a PMRF and research scholar at the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. So this scheme is basically a collaboration between NPTEL and PMRF. PMRF is a Government of India scheme to incentivize a few research scholars. It's a research fellowship. So we are required to teach in a local college outside our own institute for an hour per week. So this is a tie-up between NPTEL and PMRF wherein we can fulfill those obligations, teaching obligations. So there are two major ways where you can interact with the course team as well as us uh, during this course. One is the doubts and interaction sessions during the weekly live sessions. Ours will be every Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. During the session, as I'm going through the questions, you can raise your hand, unmute, and once I permit you, you can raise your query. The other option is you can post your questions in the chat box, wherein the questions will be addressed during the session. There is also a discussion forum for the course. It is the Ask a Question tab uh, in the course homepage. Any questions related to the live sessions, as well as generally the course, can be raised there. Questions will either be addressed in the forum or in the next week's live session. Okay. So today's session, we'll have a very short recap of what was taught in week 6 in the main lectures, after which we'll look at the assignment questions from the previous run of the course. We'll be discussing answers and looking at a few explanations. Uh, After that, we'll be looking at questions from the current run of the course, the current assignment questions, and their answers will be discussed and explained. The thing is, this week it has been quite straightforward week where most of it is technical content, right? So the external additional content component is will be a little less this time, but explanations will of course be provided where as and where necessary. So before we go for a recap of the week's contents, are there any queries? Let's keep moving on. So in week 6, we saw an outline of the EIA process. The EIA process was introduced at a very rudimentary level in some of the initial lectures, but this time we saw it in more depth, right? So lecture 26 dealt with the starting and initial stage, 27 on impact prediction, 28 on impact evaluation, mitigation and enhancement, 29 was on participation, presentation and review, and lecture 30 was on follow-up, which is monitoring and auditing. Right. So if you remember, this is an outline of the EAA process. So the first lecture actually spoke about the management setup for conducting the EAA process. So there was an introduction before this. We delved into this EAA process where we looked at what kind of a management team or an EAA process team has to be set up for the EAA to be conducted. And then this part was covered in lecture 1, and then lecture 2 sort of looked at this part, right? Prediction of impacts. So lecture 3 had impact evaluation, assessment, identification of mitigation measures, right? Then lecture 4 saw public consultation and participation as well as these parts. And then lecture 5 of the week. This was the 30th lecture in the course overall series dealt with this, right? So this was 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. Right? In lecture 26, in the starting and initial stage, like I said, we saw the setting up a management process for the EIA activity. We saw screening, scoping, baseline studies, and impact identification. In lecture 27, which was on impact prediction, we saw the dimensions of prediction, methods and models for prediction, uncertainty in EIA process, and forecasting data structures, data sources. Sorry. In lecture 28, we saw EIA process impact evaluation, mitigation, and enhancement, particularly focusing on impact evaluation and importance of significance, mitigation, and then enhancement of potential benefits. Lecture 29 was on participation, presentation, and review. So first we saw content on gaining a conceptual understanding of public participation, including legislative provisions, different forms of participation, challenges of public participation, requirements of effective participation, and methods. Then we looked at EIA presentation, review of EIA, and decisions of projects. Right? Lecture 30 focused on follow-up, which is post the EIA report is submitted, including monitoring and auditing. So we saw the key elements of EIA follow-up, definitions, key questions for follow-up, international monitoring practice, developing countries' experiences, reference case studies. Right? So before we move on to some assignment questions, any queries on the taught content? All right. So before we proceed further, there are a couple of pointers. One, we will have a 5-minute break around 7 o'clock. Right, so, uh, sorry. Uh, yeah, so around 7 o'clock, there'll be a very short break because it's a 2-hour session and it will be too long for us to keep ranting on. Right? The second thing is internet has been a little dicey on campus for me. So there has been a short circuit problem in one of the LAN wires. So in case of disruptions, please hold on and wait. I'll try to reconnect as soon as possible. Right? Okay. So also from the previous session questions are a little jumbled up. I've tried to maintain a sequence where it goes through the lectures in order, right? So we'll be starting with question number 12, and then after a few questions, we'll be moving on to question 1, right? So please don't worry about the order. All right. Question number 12 from the previous assignment. Match the following styles of the EIA process of Group A with their description of Group B. Okay, so we have 4 styles of EIA process. Rigorous EIA, democratic EIA process, ethical EIA process, and adaptive EIA process. And we have the corresponding options. Uh, any responses? You can give me individual options also. As in, say you think P is 2, you can give me the option separately instead of the whole ABCD. And don't worry about being wrong. Please do make an attempt. Any answers? All right, the approach that you can take for most of these questions is to sort of have a few keywords in mind for every answer. That sort of keeps you on safe ground, right? So even using common sense at times, even if you don't know the answer, if you just look at what is given, most of the times you can sort of, you know, narrow down the answers. Okay, let's look at the answers. Uh, let's first try to match here itself. So the rigorous EIA process. So when we talk about rigor, what should come to your mind is something like scientific rigor, right? When you are being thorough or completely systematic with your process, right? Which means two seems to be the most appropriate answer. Systematic and rather, let's go this way. We will counter match, right? So in group B, the option one is works best when proponents are willing to assign their decision making authority to representatives. So the decision making is sort of given to representatives who in turn have the time, energy, and resources to participate in planning and decision making processes with other parties. So this line indicates a democracy, right? That's what we do. We sort of elect MLAs, MPs who go ahead and make decisions for us. So which is where the clue is. So this is the democratic EAA process. All right. So the second point is systematic and intensive EAA process is desirable where scientific analysis can support decision making. So it's systematic and intensive, and it's supported by scientific analysis. So that will be rigorous. Uh, that will be a rigorous EAA process. The third one is appropriate for turbulent and complex situations. So, where risk, uncertainty, and health predominate, and where the EIA needs to take into account knowledge limits and uncertainty related concerns. So, here the point is if it is a turbulent and complex situation and where it is dominated with risk and uncertainty, we usually go for adaptation, right? So, that is the adaptive EIA process. And then the fourth one required when issues of fairness, equity, and justice predominate. So I think that itself gives us the answer. And when the stakeholders are willing to identify and reconcile their ethical conflicts, right? So that will be the ethical EA process. So P2, Q1, R4, and S3. So these are the slides that sort of give us the answer for this question, right? And we have the types of EAA process or styles of EAA process rather here. So rigorous, systematic, and intensive EAA process desirable when scientific analysis can support decision making. This is one of our answers. This is one of our answers. Right. And ethical EAA process and adaptive EAA process. So the answer is A. So P2, Q1, R4, S3. Any queries regarding this? Most of this week's content is actually very direct, right? All right, let's move on to the next question. State true or false. European Union 2017 C guidance is on scoping. Let's see the answer. So this particular 2017 C guidance is actually focused on screening. Part C was on screening. Okay. So there is a guidance released by European Union, which is I mean the European Commission to be more specific. You can see from the top of the report, right? So there is another guidance for scoping, but this particular one, 2017 C, was on screening. Okay, so the answer is false. Any queries regarding this? Right. So the European Commission has actually, before this one, there was a 2001 series of guidance documents on the EAA process as well, right? So this is from the 2017 document. It focuses on the concept of screening. So it has three main sections. One is the concept of screening. Part B focuses on practical guidance on screening, and Part C focuses on screening checklists. Okay, so it gives us case by case screening too. So there are several checklists that you can get. So this document is available in this link. Right? The link is also given in the main presentation file. So the 2001 report also had several features that got carried over to the 2017 report as well. For example, there is a flowchart as to how the steps in screening happens, right? And this is the old screening checklist, right? So moving on to the next question. State true or false. TOR is abbreviated as terms of reference. Is it true or false? We have one answer. Any other responses? One second. Okay, we have one response in the chat box. And you are true, sir. You are correct. The answer is true. So in India, TOR is actually used for scoping purpose, right? So this TOR is the full form is terms of reference. So TOR is actually the tool that any so here if you look at this, the environmental appraisal committee or the state environment appraisal committee. So this one's the central body, this one's the state body. They sort of determine detailed and comprehensive TOR addressing all relevant environmental concerns for the preparation of an EIA report in respect of the project or activity for which prior environmental clearance is sought. So whenever a body actually goes to, get an environmental clearance, they are supposed to get an EIA and they go ahead and, seek EIA clearance. There is an EAC that is formed at the center level for category A projects, and for category B1 projects, it's a state level environment appraisal committee. They formulate a detailed and comprehensive terms of reference that is given to the applicant, whoever is seeking to get environmental clearance, that is given to the applicant as saying these are our concerns, this is where our doubts lie, this is where I think you're going to affect the environment. So the respondent or the applicant is supposed to conduct the EIA along these lines mandatorily. Say there is one industry that is coming up near a big water body. Its impact on the water body might be something that they specifically mention, saying you have to give us these details as to how it is going to be, right? So that's the terms of reference. Okay. There are sample PORs that are available in this link. So the answer is true, and you are right, Mr. Balaji. Any queries regarding this? All right. Moving on to the next question. Impact prediction in EIA involves identification of the following: geographical extent of impacts, duration of the impacts, prediction over the life of a project, D, all of the above. Any responses? Okay, we have one response, and you are right, sir. So it is all of the above. So this is directly taken from the slide, which gives a list of you know aspects that are involved in prediction identification. So direct and indirect impacts, geographical extent of impacts, beneficial or adverse impacts, duration of the impacts, prediction over the life of a project, rate of change of impacts, irreversible, reversible, or cumulative impacts. So here, prediction over the life of a project, essentially any project has something called a design period. Okay, so I'm so sorry about the handwriting. So in this design period, so say usually water based water supply, water distribution, or such projects are usually designed for 30 years, right? So most infrastructure projects actually have a time period for which they're expected to be in operation. Like apart from, they might end up staying longer than that, but this is sort of the period that it's planned to operate for, right? So whatever impact assessment we are doing, we'll have to end up doing it for this entire period where the project is, supposed to be operational. It can't be just for a limited period or during construction or something like that, right? So, and duration of the impacts points out that your project might, the design period might end, but the impact might continue, right? So how long is the impact going to stay for? Say you end up causing deforestation, it's not going to be easy really renewing the same amount of project or that patch or that geographical extent back to its original form, say for 100 years, right? So the duration of the impact also matters, right? So the answer is all of the above. Any queries regarding this? All right, moving on to the next question. State true or false. The superimposition of an image onto a photograph in order to create a realistic representation of how the proposed structure will appear in the landscape is called photomontage. Is it true or false? So this term is actually not specific to EIA or environmental assessment. It's a very common term, right? But it applies here also. Photomontage. Any responses? Okay, let's look at the answer. So if you remember, uh, this was an image shown in the slide. So this slide is better. So a photomontage is the superimposition of an image onto a photograph in order to create a realistic representation of how the proposed structure will appear in the landscape. So the answer is actually true. If you notice here, say this is the existing view of the site, right? You can add components to it and then check how the view will end up looking. For example, there is a in this site this thing is being added, right? So there is a 3D model of the project that is being added, and we're actually adding, right? So here, if you notice, view displaying the 3D model of the proposed development. Here, 10 operation with mitigation. So the mitigation might be to plant trees, right? So here, this view is almost clear except a few buildings here, right? This building adds to that, breaking of the natural skyline. If you notice here, if we follow the mitigation procedures, say that was given in the projects, it might not stand out so much, right? It will end up gelling with the skyline. But how have they shown this? Through this technique called photomontage. So they take an image and then they sort of create a realistic representation. Right? I hope that's clear. So the answer is true. Any queries regarding this? So this is actually, if you remember, there are three types of modeling, right? Hard modeling, soft modeling, and mixed modeling. So this is a method of soft modeling, where hard modeling is where you use very rigorous quantitative methods and mathematical modeling. Soft modeling is through techniques like these. All right, moving on to the next question. State true or false. Stochastic model Stochastic model indicates degree of probability of the occurrence of a certain event by specifying the statistical probability that a certain number of events will take place in a given area and or time interval. Is it true or false? Reading the question again. Stochastic model indicates the degree of probability of the occurrence of a certain event by specifying the statistical probability that a certain number of events will take place in a given area and or time interval. Is it true or false? Any responses? One second, I'm not able to open my chat box. Okay. Okay, I'm not able to open my chat box. So let's see the answer. So
False,
there are,
madam, false.
okay, okay, okay. Let's see what the answer is. Okay, you said that it's false. So the answer is actually true. If you look at this slide, there are two types of models, right? There's one deterministic model and the other is stochastic models. Deterministic models are when you can determine things like, without having to worry about the probability or the uncertainty that is involved. You're saying very determinedly, for sure that this is how it is going to be. Right? So that's deterministic model. Whereas a stochastic model sort of accounts for this probability, right? So it's a range. So deterministic models, for an example, is gravity models, which depend on fixed relationships. The keyword being fixed relationships. Right? So here stochastic models, the statistical probability, as in a certain number of events will take place in a given area and or time interval. So the answer is actually true, right? Any queries regarding this? So this is actually out of context, to be honest, but it very well represents what sort of happens in a deterministic model versus a stochastic model. So this is actually talking about the daily number of infectious persons. So this is uh, in a public health context, but in the deterministic model, we'll get one output, sort of gives us, you know, one scenario, right? But in a stochastic model, for every day, it sort of gives us slightly different outputs, right? And it's random, it's uh, within the model, right? So it accounts for this probability, like it basically looks at probability and therefore it gives us a range, right? Moving on to the next question. According to the table, if there is loss of human life in the project, sorry, one second. Yeah, according to the table, if there is loss of human life in the project, will the trade-off be acceptable? Any responses?
Non-essential essential trade-off.
I can't hear you. Your voice is breaking.
B non-essential trade-off.
Okay, okay. We have one answer. Any other answers? Also, my chat box is open now. So, are there any other answers? Okay, you're right, sir. So, if you look at this table, this is where loss of human life is. So, this is a non-negotiable impact, right? So, trade-offs are when you're ready to sort of make a compromise, right? Mm. But loss of human life is something we cannot compromise on. So, that's where. This is from this framework for judging environmental acceptability from CIPE 1994. Right? So the answer is B. You are right.
Actually, madam, even
Yeah.
there is a loss of life of animals on
Your
on
voice is getting. I can't hear you. Hello.
if loss of voice is of fauna, even then there is a size is determined कि इससे from this size or this
Hmm.
weight
Hmm.
it is considered as non-tradable. I don't know the exact measurement. Means insects and small insects and all these things can have loss of life, but
Hmm.
major loss of life they have to be relocated in case of environmental impact if we are assessing the properly.
Okay.
Means
Okay.
suppose we are putting a project and there is a wildlife. Actually, I'm
Okay.
doing such project. It
Oh,
is
okay.
inside the jungle. So even that life is I will get it to you. अगर मेल मिल गया मेरे को तो
Yes,
मैं
sir.
आपको बता दूंगा कि इवन द लाइफ जो एनिमल लाइफ भी है ना वो भी एक लिमिट है, मतलब ऐसा नहीं है
Okay.
कि वो भी हम कितने ही मार दें.
Okay. Okay, sir. Interesting. That's actually. I guess it comes under loss of biodiversity, but we don't really think of it as animal life. We'll think, oh, if the species is there, then it's we
Yes.
usually think that it's okay to kill a certain number of animals, but that's very interesting. Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you.
that up. Okay, so there is a certain limit, is it, beyond which we cannot kill. All right. So in fact, there are. I mean, digressing a little bit, there are certain local laws against even regular projects. Mm, like not necessarily laws. There are certain incentives for you to not affect biodiversity in certain regular projects as well. For example, if I'm not wrong, Bangalore, the number of trees that you save on your site, I think you get an incentive for it. So most. architects working in Bangalore, they sort of try to retain every single tree, even if it is very problematically located. They try to incorporate it in the project. Uh, like I encountered it when I worked in Bangalore. So that's interesting that we have a limit on the number of animals also that can be killed. Okay, thank you, sir, for bringing that up. All right, moving on to the next question. Criteria and standards for determining impact significance thresholds in EIA includes the following: A. Scientific evidence. B. Political repercussions. C. Public interest or perception. And D. All of the above. Any responses? Okay, we have a couple of answers. Let's look at where this is coming from. Right, so this is again directly taken from the slides. Criteria and standards for determining significance thresholds. Right, so we look at all these aspects: scientific evidence, the value of the affected environment, the level of public concern, political repercussions, public interest or perception, past and current perceptions of the significance, and impact of particular issues will matter. Okay? So the answer is actually all of the above. This significance threshold is sort of not exactly what we see in scientific research. That significance is very rigorous and mathematical. So this is more in the common man's parlance, right? As in how significant is an impact. So the answer is all of the above. Right, moving on to the next question. Fill in the blank space of P and Q to complete the list of steps of mitigation hierarchy in EIE. Question 7. Any responses? We have a couple of answers. Let's see what the answer is like. So here the hierarchies: avoid, minimize, rectify, compensate, and enhance. So mitigation is when you within the project you sort of engineer aspects where you try to mitigate the negative impacts of a project, right? And there are several steps towards it. There are several levels rather that a project might choose to do. So a project might completely avoid the impact, right? So, or they might end up trying to minimize. Avoid as in they don't really do anything about it, right? Like, okay, so this is the potential impact and I can't do anything about it, so let it be. Right? So when it comes to minimize, we try to decrease the spatial or temporal scale of the impact during design, construction, etc. Rectify is when certain rehabilitation techniques are employed after the impact has occurred. For example, say you end up cutting down trees, you try to replant. Then we have compensate, where offset the residual impact and compensate as appropriate. Right? So whenever there is a residual impact, we also compensate for it. Right? It's not just about rectifying, but we realize that rectification means that loss has not really been completely reversed. Right? The loss did happen, so we go ahead and compensate as well. And then there's enhancement. Enhancement is when there is we sort of create new avenues for benefit creation. Right? So so here it will be avoid and rectify, right? So the answer is A. I think you are right about the answer, right? So, any queries regarding this? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Which of the following principles of the Rio Declaration promotes public participation in environmental decision making and access to information and justice in environmental matters? So, amongst the principles of Rio Declaration, which one focuses on public participation? So, public participation sort of becomes meaningless if they do not have access to information, right? So, any responses? All right. So, the answer comes from this slide. Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration focuses on public participation. Yes, you are right. The answer is C, right? So, the thing is, it's important to remember certain lists. For example, sustainable development goals or performance standards of the IFC, and then principles of the Rio Declaration, at least especially the ones that have been mentioned in the slides. So yes, the answer is C. You are right, Mr. Balaji. Moving on to the next question. In India, EIA notification 2006 defines public consultation as the process by which the concerns of local affected persons and others who have plausible stake in the environmental impacts of the project or activity are ascertained with a view to taking into account all the material concerns in the project or activity design as appropriate. Any answers? So we are focusing on the definition of public consultation, right, as per the EIA notification 2006. Okay, let's look at where this comes from. So this is an excerpt from the public EIA notification 2006. So there is this mention of public consultation. Here, it refers to the process by which concerns of local affected persons. So that's one party, right? And the other group is others who have plausible stake in the environmental impacts of the project or activity. So it actually includes both the affected persons or others who might have a stake in it, probably not being directly affected, right? Are ascertained with a view into taking into account all the material concerns in the project or activity design as appropriate. So why is this done? In order to take into account the material concerns in the project. So the answer is true. Any queries regarding this? Moving on to the next question. So label the ladder of participation of EIA in the correct sequence. So we have three missing parts, P, Q, and R. Any responses? You can also give me individual answers. As in what is P, what is Q, and what is R. Give you one answer. So let's see what the answer is. So this is the ladder of citizen participation. It's actually a very, very famous uh, diagram given by Einstein. Right? So here we see this was P, So the level of participation increases as we go up the ladder, right? So this is the lowest level of participation: manipulation, therapy, informing, consultation. So consultation is here, partnership is here. Actually, one of the slides is missing. One second. Okay. Yeah. So as we move up, it's increasing, right? So the highest level is citizen control, then delegated power, and then we have partnership. So citizen power comes under these three. Right? Then we have placation, consultation, and informing. That comes under tokenism, and then non-participation includes therapy, manipulation. So we have we have consultation, partnership, citizen control. Right? So the answer is A. Right? So let's take a closer look at this ladder of citizen participation. This was actually published by Sherry R. Arnstein in 1969, okay, in the Journal of the American Institute of Planners, JAPA. So under JAPA, right? So this one, it talks about, it establishes the need for such a citizen participation. So this is a graphic from the paper itself. So it's a French student poster which says, I participate, you participate, he participates, we participate, you participate, they profit. Right? So it also establishes why we need increasing levels of citizen participation. Right? So this is the diagram given by Einstein, the eight rungs on a ladder of citizen participation. You can see how these two come under one level, and then this, and then this. Right? So this was a useful graphic that sort of is available. So I just thought I'll include it, right? So here the three terms that we saw, one was consultation, where we invite citizens' opinions when consultation processes is not combined with other modes of participation, and there's no assurance that citizens' concerns, ideas, and ideas will be taken into account. So we ask them for opinions, but it doesn't mean we'll actually take things into account, right? So then we have partnership. In partnership, we have shared planning and decision making responsibilities through such structures as joint policy boards, planning committees, and mechanisms for resolving impasses. So we have, such bodies that sort of look into shared planning responsibility. Right? Then we have citizen control. Citizen control has residents can govern a program or an institution. So they are part of the governing body itself, be in full charge of policy and managerial aspects, and be able to negotiate the conditions under which outsiders may change them. So somebody else, in even a technocrat, they can have a say in such change. Doesn't mean supreme control, but yes, they do have substantial amounts of control. So only these top three actually gives an actual degree of citizen power. The next three is more like tokenism, as in we sort of uh, make it look like they have some power, but it's not really there. The last two are just complete absence of participation, right? So Sherry Arnstein was actually a special assistant to the assistant secretary at the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Right. So she later moved into public policy because this particular paper sort of became extremely famous and very influential. So if you remember, last week we had spoken about the Aquacon guidelines, and there was a study which spoke about where does the guidelines fall, like in terms of public participation, and they were merely placating, right? It was still at the level of tokenism and not real power to the citizens. This is from the previous uh, week. Any queries regarding this? All right. Moving on to the next question. Match the following terms in Group A with their description in Group B. So we have two terms, consultation and participation, and we have their definitions or their descriptions. Any answers? We have one answer. Any others? So let's see. Here, the first option is approaches that give a more active role to the public in influencing the plan development and approval. Whereas option two is exercise involving a passive audience. The public's views are solicited, as in asked for, but respondents have little active influence over any resulting decision. So, like we just saw, right? So, the active role is participation. Okay, and whenever there is a passive audience where we ask for their opinions, but like we need not take them up, or they won't really have, they don't have active influence over any resulting decision. Say they actually suggest something and then we don't take it into consideration, there is no, implication about it. So this is a slide where it is taken from, right? The active role is participation and passive audience is consultation, right? So the answer is B. You are right, sir. Uh, the answer is B. So yet again, slightly. I mean, this is applicable here also, but the original paper doesn't really deal with environmental impact assessment, right? So when we look at consultation, so this is the planning group, the guideline development group. They give their opinions. This was about again, I think public health. So the patients sort of give their opinions, but these people listen, but that doesn't mean they actually, take it into consideration. Whereas participation is when the guideline development group actually constitutes some of the public as well. Right? Any queries regarding this? All right. Before we move on to the next question, let's take a short break. So let's meet around 7:05. Right? All right, let's continue with the session. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. Moving on to the next question. Match the following terms in Group A with their description in Group B. So we have three terms in Group A: monitoring, environmental impact auditing or evaluation, environmental management auditing. And we have three descriptions. Any answers? We have a few responses. So let's look at it, each one of them. The first one is review public and private corporate pattern and program for environmental management and the associated risks and liabilities. So this talks about the corporate pattern and program. So which sort of connects to environmental management auditing. So we are auditing the management itself, right? So that will be R1. The second one, where you measure and record all the variables, parameters of your concern at certain intervals, such as air quality, water quality, noise level, traffic generated, employment rated. So that will be monitoring. Monitoring is when you just measure and record, right? You keep a tab on all these parameters, right? So the third one, this involves comparing the impacts predicted, what was done in EAA report with the actual after implementation. So environmental impact auditing, or it's also called as evaluation. So this is where these are the slides that are talking about these, right? So for monitoring collection of data collection of large quantity of data in a systematic manner for considerably long period of time happens. Okay, but for environmental impact auditing or evaluation, so it is comparing the impacts predicted, what was done in EAA report with the actual after implementation. It sort of helps us to evaluate how was the impact prediction, how accurate the impact prediction was, and how good the mitigation measures are working, right? And for environmental management auditing, like we saw, it reviews public and private corporate pattern and programs for environmental management and the associated risk and liabilities. So the answer is D. So this measuring and recording part always is monitoring. Whenever there is a corporate pattern review, that's environmental management auditing. Right? So when we look at what was done in the EA report and we look at the actual after implementation, that's evaluation. Right? Any queries? All right, moving on to the next question. State true or false. Monitoring in India is mandatory as per the EIA notification of 2006. Is it true or false? Any responses? So we have a couple of responses. Let's see. So it is actually post environmental clearance monitoring shall be made mandatory. Right? They have to submit half-yearly compliance reports in respect of the stipulated prior environmental clearance terms and conditions. So based on what was already stipulated, they will have to give monitoring. So the answer is true, right? Some of you are correct. Any queries regarding this? Okay, moving on to the next question. State true or false. The London Olympics 2012 project provided a framework for the monitoring of the biophysical and socio-economic impacts. True or false? Any responses? So we have one response. Any others? All right. So this is actually directly lifted from the case study on London Olympics 2012 project. So the project indeed provided a framework for the monitoring of the biophysical and socio-economic impacts of the project. So that answer is true. However, there was a related study that I found on Nature Journal. So this was a study of all the Olympic Games from 1992 to 2020. It sort of plots the trend lines and important milestones of sustainability. Right? There are a couple of milestones that happened in 1994. The Lillehammer Games was labeled as the first green games, right? And in 1994, the Olympic Committee declares the environment as the third pillar of Olympism. So, 96, sustainable development was included in the Olympic Charter. In 99, the International Olympic Committee introduces Agenda 21. Right? So, in 2010, Vancouver was labeled as the first sustainable games. Right? So, London Olympics sort of falls here. All right. So we can see how the ecological, social, economic, as well as overall sustainability in these projects have actually gone down over the years. Like in general, of course, some of them are, have widely varying trends, right? But ecological in general has been going down. The link has been provided for the paper in case you are curious as to how this has been plotted. Okay, before we move on to the current uh, week 6 assignment questions, any other queries? Any queries regarding the taught content from the week? All right, moving on to the current week's assignment questions. There'll be another query session towards the end as well, right? So, from the current assignment, the first question. The European EIA directive requires an EIS to include a description of the project, description of the physical characteristics of the whole development. This is the whole development, description of the main characteristics of the operational phase of the project, and estimate by type and quantity of expected residues and emissions. Any answers? Okay, we have one answer. Any others? Okay, one of you is right. So, unfortunately, in the lecture handout that was given in the website, this slide is missing. I'm not sure how that happened, but the slide is present in the video itself. So it's better to save it. So this is the place where they've taken the answer from. So you can see all four of them are actually part of the European EAA directive requirements for an EIS. Right. So the answer is D. Any queries? All right. Moving on to the next question. Impact identification techniques for scoping purpose involves one, environment that are particularly okay, so that's very badly placed. Environments that are particularly valuable should be identified. Impacts considered to be of particular concern to the affected parties. Methodology should be used to predict and evaluate different impacts. Scale at which those impacts to be considered. So involves as in this is not an exhaustive list. Any responses? So we have one response. Any others? Okay, both of you are right. So this is the full list. Okay, so this is environmental attributes that are particularly valued should be identified. So this is part of our list, right? Am I audible? I hope I'm. Was there an issue? Am I audible now? Yeah. Okay. So I think my headphone just got disconnected. Sorry. So yeah, going back. So these are all part of the list. Right? The environmental attributes that are particularly valued should be identified. This is part of our list. Impacts considered to be of particular concern to the affected parties is part of the list. Methodology that should be used. Scale at which those impacts should be considered. We have two more aspects: broad alternatives that might be considered, and outcome should be identification of the keys, impacts, and alternatives. Right? So the answer is in fact D. Moving on to the next question. In India, terms of reference is used for scoping purpose. True or false? We already saw this earlier in the session today. Any answers? We have one answer. Any others? You are right, sir. So TOR or terms of reference are used for scoping purpose. Basically, that's how the appraisal committee instructs the applicant as to how to what aspects should be considered for scoping, right? Like we saw earlier in the session. And this is the link for some standard forms that are usually there for certain sectors. The answer is true, right? Moving on to the next question. Match style of EIA given in group 1 with their description in group 2. So we saw some of these earlier in the sessions today, right? We saw rigorous EIA process, ethical EIA process, and adaptive EIA process. You just need to know streamlined or rapid EIA also. So any responses? You can give partial answers also.
C.
Okay. We have one answer. Anybody else? So, like we saw earlier, let's go through the descriptions. Okay, we have a couple of answers in the chat box also. Let's see. So, style is adopted when issues of fairness, equity, and justice. So that will be ethical EIA, right? So R is one. Systematic and intensive EIA process is desirable where scientific analysis can support decision making. So we have systematic and intensive EIA and scientific analysis. So that will be rigorous. So P2. Third one, this style is applied when resources are limited or less data is available. So this is the new option of the evening. So this is streamlined or rapid EIA. So we have limited resources, therefore we go for a quick or a rapid EIA. Streamlined as in it's sort of narrowed down. Right? Then EIA style is adopted when turbulent and complex situations. So that's persist and there are risks, uncertainty, and health concerns. So that will be adaptive. So we have P2, Q3, R1, and S4. So all of you are right. So this is the slide from which we, we get all the styles of the EAA process. Right? So these are the descriptions. So the answer is C. Moving on to the next question. Match the following types of impact prediction with examples given. So we have three options. Hard model, where use of mathematical situation model plays a central role. Mixed model, where simulation modeling is complemented and sometimes replaces by technically more lower level approaches. So like both are used basically. And R is soft model, where use of mathematical simulation modeling is virtually non-existent. Okay, we have a couple of answers. Let's see. So in this, we have perception studies, air and noise impacts. Traffic impacts make considerable use of modeling, but often with some sample survey. So here, if you notice, the traffic impacts option actually talks about modeling, but sample survey input as well. So that's mixed model, right? Air and noise, we usually go for standard monitoring methods. So that's completely from air quality and noise levels. So these two. Perception studies are completely soft models. So there is nothing too mathematically rigorous about them. Q is 3. So P2, Q3, and R. So all of you are right. So these are the slides which deal with these three. So hard model examples are air and noise impacts. So for example, for air pollution, we use this Gaussian dispersion model, which simulates the shape of the pollution plume from the development under concern, right? So where gaps are there, we sort of so say this for this big area, we have these monitoring points at 3 points. The rest of it is sort of simulated, right? For soft model, where the use of mathematical simulation is modeling is virtually non-existent. The example is cultural resource assessment, for example, mapping and inventories are taken, perception studies, photo montages, use of GIS. GIS not for analysis but just for representation, right? Can help in the prediction of impacts. Mixed modeling, an example is like we saw traffic impacts. Right? This sample survey input is the soft part. So you are all of you are right. Answer is C. Moving on to the next question. Choice of EIA method is based on following range of considerations. Geographical areas, different stages of assessment, resources at hand, and criteria of replicability. Any answers? All right, we have one response. Any other answers? Okay, you are right, sir. So this is the full list, right? Geographical area, different stages of assessment, what resources you have, criteria of replicability, consistency, and adaptability are the ones that are not mentioned in the answer, right? So the answer is D. Both of you are right, please. Okay, moving on to the next question. State true or false. The following diagram shows causal network diagram that demonstrate causal relationships between their elements that can be used to identify what kind of impact will happen from the proposed project. Is it true or false? Question is whether this is a causal network diagram. They've given the definition of the description of a causal network diagram as well. Okay, we have a couple of answers. The answer is true, right? So all of you are right. So this is the slide that deals with causal networks, right? So the answer is true. That's a direct question. So moving on to the next question. Label the missing elements of decision tree for environmental acceptability. So P, Q, R, and S are missing. Any responses? You can give me individual answers as well. You must have answered these quite recently, right? Okay, correct. P is acceptable because directly proceeds to the next step, right? So which means P is acceptable. As in whatever impact it is okay, it's all right for us. So yes, P is acceptable. Okay. Let's see here. S sort of leads to stop, right? Which means we are going to abandon it in whole or part. So P is acceptable. Acceptable. S is abandoned. Correct. Yes, you are right, sir. So R sort of comes to abandon or redesign. So which means R is actually unacceptable. Yes, you are right. R is unacceptable. So when it's unacceptable, you either say no to it or you try to make modifications to revive the project, right? Which leaves us with Q as manageable. Yes, yes, you are right. Both of you are right. So that's the slide where the decision tree comes from. So when it's manageable, again, we have two options. Either the proponent makes a commitment saying, like they'll keep it towards acceptable levels, or we impose certain regulatory controls so that it becomes the impact is limited, right? The undesirable impact is limited. So the answer is A. Both of you are right. Right. Moving on to the next question. Order the following stages of cost benefit analysis. Applying sensitivity analysis, identifying the physical impacts of the project and policy, valuing impacts, discounting of cost and benefit flows, applying the net present value test, defining the project policy. Any responses? Okay, so there are a couple of answers. Let's see. So this is the sequence of options for cost benefit analysis. We first define the project or policy, like what is it, right? Then identify what impacts it's going to have, like identifying physical impacts of the project or policy. Then we assign values to these, right? And then there is discounting of cost and benefit flows. So discounting I think we'll take a look at discounting a little later also. So this is mm, these two sort of go in parallel, right? So discounting is determining the current value, like the mm, net present value essentially, right? And then applying sensitivity analysis. So the answer is A. Okay, project or policy. So let's take a short look at what cost benefit analysis is. It's a very basic process and an extremely useful tool. So it's actually a systematic process of evaluating the desirability of a decision by weighing its potential benefits and costs. So this is a video from Investopedia.
Cost-benefit analysis, CBA, is a method used to make business and economic-based decisions. CBA can be used to judge a single option or compare two or more options to select the optimal alternative. CBA consists of estimating all the costs of a particular decision, then comparing them to the estimated benefits of that decision. CBA can be performed using very sophisticated financial models that take into account not only tangible costs and benefits, but also hard to quantify intangibles, such as employee morale and customer satisfaction. Another cost included in a CBA is the opportunity cost of not pursuing other alternatives. For instance, ABC Incorporated plans to build a new production facility. A CBA will consider the cost to build the new project against the benefits of added productivity from a modern plant. The CBA might also include an increase in employee morale. Individuals do CBA as well, though not always consciously. For example, the decision to remodel a kitchen is a CBA. The homeowner calculates the additional value to his home, along with the intangible value of using an improved kitchen, and compares it to the remodel cost. Another cost the homeowner may consider is the opportunity cost of not using the remodeling funds for other purposes, such as his children's college fund. If the benefits exceed the cost, the kitchen will get remodeled.
So that was just a short video on cost benefit analysis. I hope the concept is clear, right? It's a very basic process. Moving on to the next question. Match the following. So we have three options: shadow pricing, discount pricing, and equity weights. Any answers? So we have one response. Any other? We have a couple of responses. Let's look at the options, right? The first one is aggregation over people, which is comparing cost according to different people. So whenever we look at aggregation over people, we look at equity weights. Okay. The second point is aggregation over goods, which is we compare costs. Comparing cost is one form, and the benefits are in other form. That is concrete used for the dam and the electricity produced from it. So what happens is whenever we add things, even in like rudimentary school mathematics, we can't really add apples to say computers, right? We usually keep four apples plus five apples. Or if the category is fruits, then okay, then you can add four apples and five oranges or whatever. So this particular aggregation over goods, this method sort of allows us to, you know, perform operations on different types of goods. So it's aggregation over goods. That's called shadow pricing. Okay, so this term is actually used in multiple forms. So currently for EIA, this is the version that we are looking at, aggregation over goods and aggregation over time. So comparing cost incurred now from the benefits that are expected in the future, right? So the benefits might not happen immediately, which is why we have something called discount pricing. Right? So it's P2, Q3, and R1. So all of you are right. So this is the slide that sort of summarizes these points. Right? So what is shadow pricing? There are two actual, like in general, there are two major definitions. One is the actual market value of a money market fund share, even if its stated value is $1 per share. So this one is the financial definition, which will not be used looking at. We are focused on the second one. Right? The assignment of a dollar value to an abstract commodity that is not ordinarily quantifiable as having a market price but needs to be assigned as a valuation to conduct a cost benefit analysis. So we do shadow pricing so that we can sort of conduct a cost benefit analysis, right? So this is more common and involves a shadow price that is assigned to goods that are not generally bought and sold as separate assets in a marketplace. So such as production costs or intangible assets as also, right? As happiness, satisfaction, all of these things also are usefully summarized when it comes to shadow pricing. When we are doing a cost benefit analysis, all these intangible aspects will also have to be taken into consideration, right? So moving on to discounting. Discounting is the process of determining the present value of a payment or a stream of payments that is to be received in the future. So again, let's look at a. So this video is about starts with discount rate. So discount rate is what we use to calculate net present value. So you don't have to go into the details of it. Like just follow the second part of the video. Like after the first sentence, when they actually talk about discounting, which is discount pricing. Let's
The discount rate is the interest rate you need to earn on a given amount of money today to end up with a given amount of money in the future. Let's say you need $1,000 1 year from now to go on vacation. We can use the discount rate to determine how much money you would need to have today to have $1,000 in 1 year. If savings accounts are paying 5% interest, it makes sense to use 5% as the discount rate. In a simple example where savings accounts pay interest all at once at the end of the year, what amount do you have to put up now that would equal $1,000 when 5% is added? Dividing the future amount of $1,000 by 1 plus the discount rate will give us the answer, $952.38. This means that if you take $952.38 today and put it in a savings account that pays 5% interest per year, you will have $1,000 in 1 year and be able to go on vacation. It's important to choose a realistic number for the discount rate, but often you can only make an educated.
So in environment assessment, we sort of do it the other way. So we sort of look at the current value of a future benefit, right? So sorry, this is not cost benefit analysis. One second. Right. So again, we're looking at equity weights. So this is in a slightly different context, but I think here we can sort of understand. So this is again from a public healthcare experimentation context, right? So we look at outcomes based equity weights and cost side equity weights. Let's look at outcome based. Let's not look at. So whenever we are, so here QALY is quality adjusted life years. So say because of some intervention, medical intervention, there is a particular target group whose quality of life improves. Okay. So usually when we look at the monetary term, we will probably we look at, okay, they're going to save in healthcare. We don't have to spend on that particular, person's healthcare because they'll have a better life. But that is not the only aspect of a better quality of life, right? So say somebody has some form of arthritis, and it's not just about treating arthritis. The whole point is when you have leg pain, You end up working slower in a job. You might get fired. You might not be able to do your daily activities, in a better manner. So all of these are also, when you say cure arthritis, like say, hypothetically, you end up actually giving a much better life. It's not just about the healthcare amount that is saved or the economic cost. So it's a holistic calculation, right? So the equity weight will sort of adjust this part. You cannot just take that value as such. It's much more than that value. So it will be adjusted upwards. As in, we will calculate more value than the actual literal outcome is, or literal dollar value is, right? So that will be equity weights. Any queries regarding this? All right. Moving on to the next question. 4 levels in increasing public power and public participation methods are: one, information feedback methods; consultation; joint planning; delegated authority. Which of these are part of the 4 levels? Any responses? We have one response. Any others? We have a couple of responses, and one of you is right. So these four are actually the 4 levels of increasing public power and participation methods, as has been summarized in Westman 1985. Okay, so the answer is B, all four. Right. So Westman actually takes this from two other sources. He summarizes this. This table is present as part of the presentation, the slides given for the lectures as well. So he summarizes them from Collins and Lang and Arnold. Right. So the book is called Ecology, Impact Assessment, and Environmental Planning. Okay. So, but these are not the only aspects of public participation that he talks about. So this is classified by degree of power to the given to the public in decision making, right? So there are other classifications that he again borrows from. Public participation approaches classified by degree, level, and type of communication. So this is communication focused. So this is the public participation techniques. These are the communication characteristics and the planning objectives. So where is it applicable? And if you see 1, 2, and 3, so low, medium, and high, right? For example, in public hearings, the degree of two-way communication is medium, level of public contact achieved is low, and the ability to handle specific interest is also low. It is usually employed towards identifying problems or values or feedback, or rather, it's suitable for. The list is actually quite long. Right? This is partial part of the list. And there is another classification that he summarizes. In public participation approaches classified by types of most likely participants and degree of representativeness of multiple publics typically achieved. So in public hearings, for example, you don't see highly literate, you see highly verbal people, then white collar workers, or rather you don't see these people, is it? Or you see some presence, you don't, the level is not determined. Okay, highly informed and involved, and then there are a low level of degree of representativeness or multiple publics. Right? Here also the X sort of indicates that they are present, but the level is indeterminate. Okay? So these are the three classification approaches that he like suggests in his book. Okay? These are not for examination purpose. These are, so that you know that such such material exists out there. Moving on to the next question. Match the following purpose for public participation in EIA. So the broad purpose is given on the left, specific purpose and activities is given on the right. This is again directly taken from the slides. We have three broad purposes. P is obtaining public input into decision taken elsewhere. Q is shared decision making with public, or is alter distribution of power and structures of decision making. Any responses? Okay, we have a partial answer. Anybody else? Okay, let's see. So this is directly taken from this slide, right? So the answer is C. So obtain public input into decision taken elsewhere. So we look at provide public information, fill information gap, problem solving, and social learning. So this is directly from this slide, right? For Q, it is shared decision making with public. The specific purpose and activities are to reflect democratic principles of EIE used to obtain consent of those affected. Right? Democracy and participation as an educative function. So we sort of share the decision making with the public through these activities. And then alter distribution of power and structures of decision making by involving marginalized groups and shifting the locus of decision making. Right? So when you're doing this, you are actually altering the distribution of power and structures of it. They end up having a say in what kind of decision is taken. Right? So that's the answer. Any queries? All right, moving on to the next question. The components of monitoring should include, as in this is not the full list, but is it a, are these points part of, are they components of monitoring? One, summary of the significant impacts identified in the environmental impact report. Mitigation measure recommended for each significant impact. Monitoring requirements and responsible agencies for each mitigation measure. Timing and frequency of the monitoring. Any responses? Okay, so both of you are right. This is the full list, right? So these two are missing from the list, but this is the entire list of components of monitoring, right? So additionally, we have person or agency responsible for the monitoring of the mitigation measure and agency responsible for ensuring compliance with the monitoring program. So this is like an overarching agency. Apart from individual agencies for particular monitoring requirements, right? So the answer is D. Right. Moving on to the next question. State true or false. Implementation monitoring involves checking that the project has been implemented in accordance with the planning approvals, that mitigation measures have been carried as proposed, and that any conditions associated with the approval have been honored. So we're looking at the description of implementation monitoring. We have one answer. Any other answer? All right. So this is in fact the description of implementation monitoring. You can see basically it's whether the project is being implemented according to the plan that was approved, right? Say somebody can submit something to the EAC saying this is the plan and then end up doing something else, right? So implementation monitoring is to ensure that this confirmation happens. Right? So the answer is true. Any queries?
Just like Griha people comes to for implementation, they come to point time to time during construction or ongoing project.
Okay.
Does this Ministry of Environment does the same?
So
They
Griha, usually the outlines are for green building, for example, right?
yes,
So essentially the motive behind it, it's the same. Like you promise something and then are you delivering it? That part is the same, yes. But in this case, it's a much larger project, and the agencies are of course different, right? So even though both are government agencies, that is going to be towards one small project. So it's going to be an architectural project. It's not going to be a planning project when it comes to Griha. However, under Griha, like say there is a township guidelines. Yes, they sort of essentially end up being the same, right? But
yes.
Griha will focus only on the green part, whatever is part of their list. But this implementation monitoring will look at not just the list of scoring, it will go beyond it. Whatever has been mentioned in the scoping and then they have submitted towards it, all of those aspects will come in this. So the list is sort of, it will be different for different cases. Whereas the Griha one will be a standard set, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Any other queries? All right, we come to the end of our session. But are there any other queries in general?
Madam, when is the final exam? What is the date?
Uh, I'm not sure. I think it was announced in the page. No? I don't remember. I'm so sorry.
Is it possible to have PPTs, ma'am?
They are uploaded every week. So if you notice, one second, I'll share it with you. But I'm trying to look for the exam date.
I'm seeing a lot of videos. All I see are videos, not PPTs.
One second, I'll show you where it is. Okay, just give me a second. I'll share my screen. I don't know as to when the examination is.
Exam is on 30 next month.
When is it?
30 next month.
30th. Okay, okay. So I hope that
Yeah.
answers your question. I'm sorry, I am not up to date with the examination dates.
But can you say something on PPTs?
Yes, yes. I'm showing you where it is. Sir, I hope that answers your question on the exam date, right? I'm sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay. All right. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, if you notice, this is the home page of the course, right? Announcements page. Towards the left, you have these week 1, week 2, week 3. Under these, you have this problem solving session tab. Click that, and then you have to click again on the problem solving session option, right? When you get that, you can click here to view the problem solving session lectures. So when you go for that, you'll have. So I still haven't uploaded the last week's slides alone. I'll upload it soon. So you see this presentation folder link. That is where all the slides are. So this is for the interaction sessions. All right. Can you see them? This is for week 4. So this is for week 1. Yeah, this is for week 1. If you need the slides of the course, then for each week, so this is where the video is. You scroll down and then the presentation is beneath the video. Is that clear?
Okay,
So which
I've seen that.
presentation were you talking about, the interaction session or the original slides?
I was referring to like week 1, week 2, week 3, not interactive sessions, but
The
normal
original.
lessons.
So then they're available right below the video. Okay. If you log into your Swayam portal, right? So say week 1, you go to any lecture. So this is lecture 1, state of global environment air. I can show you how to log into you know how to log into this page, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I'm
So
doing this process.
yeah, yeah.
I can see the videos only, but yeah, I
Scroll
don't
down.
see
Ha
the.
ha. Okay. Scroll down and then you will get this option.
Okay.
Worst case
All
scenario,
right
you
then.
can bring it up and then I can post all the slides in the discussion forum if you want. Like, do mention it, and then if you are not able to access it for some reason, it should come.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other queries? All right. I hope the session has been useful. I hope the sessions are useful in general. I most definitely welcome you coming up with your content. Like, sir added a few points today because it's a learning experience for me as well. So I thank you and I much appreciate it because I mean it is a two-way process indeed. So if you have any special requests, anything particular that you want me to deal with, you can mention that as well, and we can take it up in one of the sessions. If there is nothing else, then we can call it a day. Any other queries? All right. If there are any other queries that you haven't brought up here that you would like to bring up, you can always mention in the discussion forum, right? The main queries that are, I noticed that people keep asking the same questions again and again. I think I'll go ahead and start posting links to the interaction session videos where it has been explained. I was hoping that the main team will actually address them. And nonetheless, I think one of us will start answering all of them, right? All right then. Have a good evening. Um, I hope to see you soon next week. Thank you.